Very good.
That's good.
So thank you for attending this evening. I want to welcome you to our monthly meeting of the El Dorado Hills Community Council. And we have agendas available. If you didn't happen to grab one, we'll kind of follow right through that agenda. We try to proceed as quickly as possible to cover as much information as we can. But by the same token, we want to take the time for everybody to have a chance to express themselves or voice themselves on things that aren't on the agenda. We're recognizing development is one of the major issues, and we have a planning commission meeting next week. We're not going to spend a lot of time discussing that. And APAC can talk about what's on their agenda relative to planning and stuff, so I think it'll all tie together. So with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order and just invite all of the leadership team to please identify yourself and what role you have on this leadership council. So, Chief?
Yes, so I'm Michael Linthal, Deputy Chief of the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. I represent public safety, so I try and connect any issues our community members have with either the sheriff, the CHP, or the fire department, or probation, depending on the issue that they have. So that's kind of the role of it.
I'm John Davey. I'm the chair of the El Dorado Hills APAC, and we examine development projects in El Dorado Hills and provide resident feedback to the county.
I'm Dick Ross. I work under the title of Good Governance, which I'm interpreting to mean is when we wonder how did that happen, I go and ask.
So when we talk about the need for transparency in government, Richard is a guy I rely on to be the voice of the community and try to gather some of that stuff. So to the extent possible, we're going to have a little discussion on that about some of the things we're trying to do with fact sheets. So we'll get into that later in the agenda. I'm John Heidel, District 1 Supervisor, representing El Dorado Hills.
I'm Cindy Munn, Supervisor Heidal's assistant, and I do community information and coverage.
And I'm John Vania, I'm your District 1 Planning Commissioner, and I also address infrastructure type issues.
Bree, just introduce yourself.
I'm Bree Mobius, Deputy County Council. I'm not on this council, but here at Supervisor Heidel's request tonight.
She's our guest speaker this evening, so we had her sit up here. And I do want to recognize Blaine Krakow was with us. He's recovering from some things that are going on in his life, and so he didn't want to sit up here, but he's a member of this council, has been very active with respect to community and economic development. Hopefully he'll continue in that regard, but he didn't feel comfortable being up here because he doesn't have his full strength back yet. So recognizing he's here, that's important. So with that, I'd also like to recognize any volunteer commissioners or committee members who are here. I know Raylene, can you tell us which commission you're on?
I'm Raylene Nunn, and I'm on the Commission on Aging.
Okay, yes.
We could not hear it.
Okay.
Raylene Nunn.
Raylene Nunn, she's on the Commission on Aging. And then behind you, we also have a Commissioner on Aging. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Tina Bladen, Commission on Aging.
So both of them are from El Dorado Hills, so they represent us on that commission. And I was looking to see if there are any other commissioners here who may have come in a little late that I didn't see. Committee members or commissions that are advisory to the board. I think that covers it. Because we do like to recognize the volunteer element. The board could not function as well as it does without volunteers in the community helping us with things, whether it's the seniors, whether it's a cemetery advisory committee, whether it's community and economic development. It takes a lot of volunteerism and ideas to keep the county vibrant and looking at what can we do better. And so that's the purpose of those advisory committees. So I personally want to thank everybody who volunteers for those. And with that, we'll move on to item 2, which is the adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Anyone on the leadership council like to change the order of anything? Okay, so seeing none, we'll adopt the agenda as is. Public comment. So this is the period we would ask you if you have a piece of information to share with the community council to please come up to the microphone, voluntarily identify yourself and share with us what that issue is, the concern, the idea, whatever, as long as it's not on tonight's agenda. Because we don't want to take and detract from the presentations that will happen later, discussions happen later. So anything that's not on tonight's agenda that somebody would like to address briefly, please come to the microphone and feel free to share with the leadership council. Margie, did you want to talk? Okay. So please come to the microphone so everybody can hear you. It's over here, Margie.
Oh, sorry. Shows you how used I am to doing things like this. I have 40 acres just below the Lennar development that's being happened. And they put a culvert to divert the water from their property, from their lawns, from their everyday use, from the roads. The water will come contaminated because they put Roundup on the roads, and you know what else comes from the lawns and everything else. And it has taken anywhere from 5 to 10 acres of my property that's making it unusable. They came in, they took down the fences in parts. I have cattle on the property, and the cattle runs to the church every time they can. And they also...
There's a pun.
They're very religious. They also have a heritage oak tree that's up at the corner of the property, and I know that they're authorized to cut limbs at the fence line, but they went to the trunk and they cut the limbs off of that. They removed the fence on that corner, and the cows went to test the tanks of PID. So they have really been harassing me in a way. I would like to get some help. I don't want to devalue my property. At my age, I want to leave it to my children. I don't think it's fair what they're doing. They put a big culvert there with a bunch of rocks about that tall. And you know who lives in the rocks? Rattlers. And you know what they do when they come out? They come down the hill. And we're right at my front door. And I've had enough of that without those rocks being there. I just need help.
And so we have met with Margie. We've taken telephone calls from her. We're going to schedule a meeting before the end of the month. Hopefully we can get it targeted with 3 staff members. And we've invited her to invite people she would like to have there who have knowledge of the history of it. And we'll talk through it and see if there's some accommodation, some mitigation, something that was a condition of approval that didn't get enforced, whatever it is. We'll try to do whatever we can to help your situation. That's all I can commit to at this point.
The law says that they can, I cannot keep stormwater from my property from above, and I have no problem with that. But it's not stormwater. EID is dumping their tanks. They claim it's clean water. However, I spoke to a gentleman that goes into those tanks. They dump the water out, they go in and they put chemicals in it to clean it. And then they refill it. And all that's coming on my property, so it's not clean water. And it's not storm water. So I don't know where they're getting this from. But
and the EID is a separate organization, so we can't really address that from the county's perspective other than otherwise.
yes, but
encourage a meeting, a discussion.
They put it into the culvert.
Right.
So you let it happen.
Okay.
The county let it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment. Okay, seeing none, then I'd like to move immediately to item 4, our guest speaker. Bree's already introduced herself, but I would like to note that I had invited a representative from our county council, which is Bree, to speak to us tonight to talk a little bit about what the development review process is that happens with major projects such as Central Dorado Hills, such as the Vineyards project, other projects that people have been commenting on in social media and others, to really understand what's required by the state law flow down to the county, what we have to do to honor our oaths of office as elected officials, and ultimately the decision-making process that happens depending upon the type of project. So I'm going to ask Bree to give us a little bit of her background, and then we'll get into the discussion of the process. So thank you
you.
for taking the time to show up.
My pleasure, thank you. My name is Bree Mobius. I joined El Dorado County Council's office 3 years ago. I was actually married in Shingle Springs in 2007, and we moved to El Dorado Hills in 2011 when my son was 1. And now he's a 3rd grader at Oak Meadow, and I have a 1st grader there as well. So this is where my kids take some lessons. I think that's why I moved my job up here to this county, because I live here. Probably my favorite part is my son now is a little planner, and he likes to learn about all the projects and go drive them with me and remap things out. So it makes my job tangible. My job before that, I was 9 years in federal court, which is a lot less tangible for a kid, and a lot less local, obviously, of the issues, because they're more at a federal level. And I was also teaching law at UC Davis and McGeorge before coming to the county. So I'm really happy to be at the county. I've worked a lot on land use in the last year with the Planning Commission, started representing the Planning Commission in March. Before that, I did the defense of the county, so when we were sued under the California Environmental Quality Act, I would defend the county on those cases. I also do a lot with Department of Transportation and the environmental review for public projects, so the bridges, freeways, those issues. I also did the cannabis law, so if you recall, the very long ballot measures. You can be annoyed at me for how long they were. But I'm part of the implementation of the cannabis law now in the county. Also work on mitigation fees. I done airports, cemeteries, kind of anything. In a small county, you get to do a little bit of everything. So to give an idea of planning law, I can't really go over all of it obviously in a short time tonight, so I'm going to try to keep it at a very high level, but to give you a sense of what happens when a project comes to the county, how does the county handle that, and where is it that really the public, where you get to get involved and have your voice heard in that project. I'll give an overview, and then if there are questions, I'm happy to try and answer any. I'm not going to get project specific on anything tonight. I didn't bring anything with me on particular projects, although I did bring a little bit on Central. In the end, I can go over Central and kind of where it's at and where it's going from here. So planning is a lot of balancing, and there's a lot that constrains the county, and there's a lot of discretion that the county has as well. State law really is the starting point when we talk about any development project. The state has enacted numerous laws on planning, and they continue to do so every year. A great example is affordable housing. The state's determined there's a housing crisis. It's been going on a long time. So there's continual legislation to limit the county's ability to restrict affordable housing. So anytime there's a project that has that, we have to look at that state law and how that fits in and what that restrains of our ability as a local government. There's also the California Environmental Quality Act. You probably have heard of it as CEQA, and it's CEQA, but I've seen it called a lot of things. So if I say CEQA, that's what I'm referring to those, the California Environmental Quality Act. It's highly detailed, highly procedural, and it goes over the environmental review that has to happen before the county can ever grant a permit, approve a project, take some action that's discretionary, where the county has a say, and that project would have an impact on the environment. You might have heard the terms an EIR, which is Environmental Impact Report. That's the main environmental document under CEQA. You also probably have heard of a Mitigated Negative Declaration, or an MND. That is another form of review. It's just less thorough than an EIR. So it's a project that's not going to have as many impacts as a big project, and so you might do an MND on that. Planning and zoning law regulates how we can plan, how we can zone, what we can zone. So we're looking to that all the time as well. There's a Subdivision Map Act, which governs how we can divide land, how we can provide for subdivisions. The Mitigation Fee Act, which you might have heard of, that governs how we can levy impact fees. So when a development comes in, they have impacts not just on the county and not just the residents, but on the fire department, on the CSD where we are right now. And so the county has the ability to enact fees that any developer would pay per house to mitigate for those impacts. So we first look at state law, and then we also have to keep in mind a property owner's rights. You probably all have property here and wouldn't appreciate the county coming in and telling you too much of what you can do or can't do with your property. The Constitution restrains what the county can do for developer rights as well. So they have a right to submit an application, to put together a project and submit it to the county. The county has an obligation to process that application. So it's not our application, it's not our project, it comes to the county, we have to process it. The Constitution also limits how we can condition a project. So you may have heard of conditions of approval, which is when we give a permit out, we say, yes, you can do this, but here's everything you need to do to mitigate your impacts. But we can't put a condition on unless we can show a sufficient nexus between the condition imposed and the burden of that project. So we have to be able to articulate what's that project doing and how is it impacting, whether it's our roads, whether it's the surrounding community, before we can start putting conditions on. And just like we can't tell a developer, you can't do this, if they don't agree, we can't also say, then we're going to deny your project because you won't do that. So the courts have said it works both ways. You don't get to say, you have to do this, and if it goes too far and they say no, then we can't deny the project. We would also be challenged on that by the developer. The one exception to that limit, though, is development agreements. So essential, I think you've probably heard that there's a development agreement in the works. That's where the county can reach an agreement, so it's a contractual relationship between the developer and the county where they're agreeing to things that they will do for the county, but it's not subject to the constitutional limits that the conditions of approval will. So those are why you'll see those differently. The development agreement gives the developer certain benefits as well. It gives them the certainty of when they enter that development agreement that they get the conditions at that time as they continue to develop a bigger project. So you generally will see development agreements with bigger projects that are going to be developed over a longer period of time. Balance with that, so we have all the state law we're trying to work with, our local ordinances as well, and the developers' rights, and then the public concern, and that's really where you come in. The supervisors are always cognizant of that, the planning commissioners are cognizant of that, and it's a public process, and so that's mainly what I'm focusing on tonight is what is that public process and how do you get to shape a project. CEQA and state law requires it to be a public process, and so does our county ordinance, and requires notice. The county generally goes beyond what state law requires as far as the noticing for a project. And then balance with that too is the county concerns and the county's vision and carried out by the supervisors as the policymakers on what do we want El Dorado Hills to be, what do we want El Dorado County to be, and what types of projects we would be approving on that. The supervisors are tasked with making decisions that are considered the policy decisions or legislative land use decisions, and that they are the first and final authority on those. The county's vision really is memorialized in its general plan. So I brought it with me because it's considered the constitution for land use development. So this is my copy of it, but it is available online. State law requires us to have a general plan. It's supposed to be a long-term, big picture, if you think of it, the goals and policies of the land use and development and everything really for the county. State law lays out the framework, but every county's general plan is different because every county is different. So you have mandatory elements, which you'll find in our general plan, which are land use. So that's going to be land use designations. Where do we want the development to be? What type of development? How dense do you want it to be? I know with vineyards, that's been a question as well about density bonuses, which is where you'll find that is in the general plan. Traffic and circulation. So probably if you're here, you're familiar with Measure Y, Measure E. Those were voter initiatives that amended the general plan and the traffic and circulation elements. And you have the traffic and circulation policies that limit the county's ability to give out a permit if there's impacts to level of service that aren't going to be mitigated with that project. Housing element is the one element that the state reviews and certifies, and that is because of the housing crisis. So we as a county, the state meets and they work on it and they give us what's called our RHNA number. It's our Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And they say, El Dorado County, you're responsible to come up with this much housing. You have to have a plan to do it. You can't have constraints to it. And that's where our housing element comes in. And the state is more, I wouldn't say opinionated, but it's not the right word, but they have retained more power for themselves with the housing element than other elements. There's a conservation element, an open space element, agriculture and forestry, and noise and safety. So those are the mandatory that the state says you need to think about as a county and how you're going to develop. The El Dorado General Plan also covers public services and utilities, parks and recreation, and economic development. As a whole, it's a big document. There's a lot of policies in it. There's a lot of implementation measures in it. And the state says it has to be internally consistent. So within one policy, for example, housing, we have to be consistent with all those policies. And if you read it just on a slow day, you want to sit down and read the general plan, you'll see it's really broad, and for it to be consistent, difficult to do. But it also has to be consistent as a whole. So all the policies together have to be consistent and try to work together. So it's a hard task, and the state limits our ability to amend it. If you think we are one of the few, I think we're the only nation now actually that has the original constitution that started our country and hasn't changed, right? Because you can't amend, it's hard to amend the constitution, so we don't just change it every year when we are working on it. And because the general plan is kind of looked at as our constitution as a community, the state limits our ability to just amend it. So we can't come in and do it every month and make amendments. We can bundle some amendments, which allow us to do more, but it's not something we're supposed to be coming to the supervisors with, constantly changing it. It's supposed to be a long-term plan for us. When you have a project, the supervisors have to find, the planning commission has to find that it is consistent, substantially compliant with the general plan. So you'll see when you look at a project, you'll see a staff report from planning, and it will go through the policies of the general plan and explain why it's consistent. And that's a finding that they have to make. And that can be challenged just like you can challenge under CEQA, you can make challenge under general plan inconsistency. But the courts have recognized that the document this big, no project is going to fit perfectly in there, because this is a broad, overreaching ideas and policies and goals, and a project is a concrete piece of, of development in front of you. So they said that it doesn't have to be in perfect conformity. Every project doesn't have to carry out every policy perfectly, but it has to be substantially compliant with the general plan. So that's why you'll see that in the staff reports in that discussion. When we talk general plan, then we have specific plans. So if you think general big plan, specific plan is a much smaller piece of the county that state law provides for you to come up with a plan with. So the central project does have a specific plan proposed. One that you may also be familiar with is the Serrano specific plan. So that's called the El Dorado Hills specific plan. It was adopted in 1987. So if you think of how long ago that was, and that's the idea of a specific plan, is you come up with this idea for a larger development, and then it's developed in small pieces. So Serrano's still at the board right now with J7, the J7 project for Serrano, which is not the last, but one of the last projects of the Serrano development. So the Central would similarly propose a specific plan like that that will be developed in phases or pieces, not an entire development at one time. But the specific plan covers what's the different land use going to be. So it maps out what's included, what area is included, and what's going to be the land uses, where are they going to be, how is the traffic going to be impacted through there, how are the internal streets going to run. But it's a much broader level. You're not going to see a map right now that shows you the parcels or where each project is exactly going to be. It's going to be at a more broader level, like the general plan would be. Any questions on what I've covered thus far? I can go to the application. Yeah?
Has that been amended?
The general plan? Yes, a lot. I mean, not as much as more than the Constitution. So if you look in and actually there's a new one I got called today. The new one's on its way, and I'm probably one of the few people that gets excited. But this one was amended last 2018 for the big book, but there just was amendments, I believe, 2 years ago, but this covers all the amendments if you're curious afterwards when they come. It's by resolution, so it goes to the Board of Supervisors. It will go to the Planning Commission first, and then to the Board of Supervisors.
So that's not approved yet.
For Central? No, and I'll get to that. So no, Central is nowhere near approval. The general plan has been amended many times for different projects, or I think the last amendment last month was the economic development policy had an amendment, I think, changing where TOT tax is going to be spent was the last one that was before the board. So there's minor amendments when something's not working or need to be changed. Yeah.
The general plan, I believe, can be amended 4 times a year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that a calendar year or a government county fiscal year?
I would have to look at the planning law. I don't have that memorized, but I know the section, but that's on my desk. But you can bundle. So it's not just And it depends on the element, but you can bundle it so it's not like one line doesn't count and voter initiatives don't count. But I'm happy to follow up with you on that, but it's pretty laid out.
But a project-specific one, like say for Central or Vineyards or whatever it might be otherwise in the county, it's 4 times a year for those?
Well, you'll tend to see them grouped together. So you might see an amendment for a project with the economic development. You'll see them grouped. It doesn't say you can amend more than one. If we group them, am I making sense? So you'll see them bundled.
Okay.
So that you're not limited to 4 amendments. Does that make sense? So sometimes it takes planning. Planning and really comes from planning department. A lot of them, they have to kind of look ahead. What do we see coming, so that they can bring those amendments together, so that we're not running up against the 4 amendments.
I think it's a fair statement. To my knowledge, the county's never gotten to the point that they're doing 4 and trying to cram them through. Because like Bree says, they're bundled. Typically, it's 2 or 3 a year. Sometimes it may be less than that. It just depends on what issues are brought forward. One that happened not too terribly long ago was the amendment that was made to change the density constraint for the town center apartments. Because basically we had a general plan limitation, I think it was 24 dwelling units per acre. This was a unique project, a unique opportunity from an economic development perspective. It was weighed by the board, and we said this is standalone by itself enough to allow this one-time change in the general plan to do that. It was not a carte blanche. Anybody that proposes the same kind of a development anywhere in the county is going to get that privilege, right? So you do these things judiciously if you're modifying the general plan. And then ultimately, on major general plan amendments, it's going to go back to the voters typically. It's not going to be just the board making those decisions with public input always, right? So I think the 2004 general plan that we're operating to today with amendments was actually a voter-approved type of document. So that's the heart of this, is get the voters involved when you do major updates, but recognize you need to have incremental updates in between those major updates.
And the general plan is not required to go to the voters as a whole, but in our county it did. It was enacted. I just was looking, so 2006 there was 1 amendment, 2007 there was 2, 2008 had 4, so, kind of varies, but, and this is the beginning of the general plan, but it tells you what was amended and what resolution it was that amended it, and then you'll see a strike-through version of it, but there's few policies, Measure E is one, where the county can't amend it, and that was through the voter initiative when they enacted some policies. If you follow that case is still on appeal. We represent the county in that case, and we've been waiting to hear from the court for, I think, well over a year now. It's been fully briefed, so we're still waiting on that. No other questions? I'll move to the app. Yeah.
So, Bree, were you referring to the Constitution? I'm assuming you're referring to the big guy?
The United States Constitution, yes.
Okay.
There goes my federal background sneaking out. It does that once in a while, but
Elected officers swear allegiance to the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of California. So they both have a role for elected officials to abide by that legislation, those rules. So.
And a lot of those constraints on us, when I talk about that nexus requirement we condition, that comes from the federal Constitution. And it's actually U.S. Supreme Court cases, so we're not talking local cases, but Nolan and Dolan are the main cases, but that was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. So even locally, we have a lot of federal constraints on us in land use, and then, law enforcement is probably the biggest one. You'll think of the federal Constitution with 4th Amendment, 8th Amendment, and there. So we can do civil rights. That's what I used to teach. Want to change topic? So the application for a project. So how does it start? And it's a long, slow process. And I'm sure if there's a developer here, they complain about how long it takes. But it's because there's a lot the county has to do. So the developer, though, submits the application for their project. The county, as I said earlier, has an obligation to process that application. The zoning code, so Title 130, which is here but also available on Muni Code online, talks about that procedure, the fees they have to pay. We review for completeness, we work with them on the information, and then we really start the process. Central, for example, was submitted in 2012 in November. If you think of how long it's taken to where we're here today. So when that process starts, it triggers a lot of work on the county side. A lot of times that's done by consultants, but beginning the environmental review for the project, hiring consultants to study traffic, to study fire, to study all the issues that would be around that project. So that's all happening really before there's a lot of public involvement, unless the developer chooses to have community engagement meetings, which I know that I've heard the board multiple times and the planning commissions multiple times encourage developers to do that, to get out in the community early on and to get feedback early on so that they can shape that project. In 2013, after Central, the board enacted policy J6 that does provide the general plan amendment projects that meet the certain criteria to come to the board and get conceptual approval, or requires them to do that, so that the county can also, early on when the project is still in development, make suggestions or talk about what they're looking for, what might be appropriate. Because when that application comes in, it doesn't come in as, here's our project. You're going to go through the environmental review. That's going to shape the project. You're going to see wetlands that you might have to mitigate for. You might have to move what is happening to avoid a wetland. There might be cultural resources that you don't know about yet because you haven't hired those consultants. So during that time, with Central, just from 2012 to 2019, that's what's all happening and shaping and changing that project as you're going through that review period. So then we get, let's go kind of fast forward all those years, and we get to decision time and public involvement time. And to determine what that is, you first look at what type of review you're going to have, and that's also in the zoning ordinance on Title 130 that lays out. And then 3 types you would have is staff level review without notice. That's going to be a very ministerial, your building permit for your single family residence that you're checking the setbacks on the engineering plan. Staff level review with notice. So it's something that's not going to go to a hearing, but the zoning code or state law says you still need to have notices surrounding property owners, and so there'll be that notice. Public hearing, obviously, with notice. So the public hearing is not even just the big projects, there's smaller projects that, cell towers are public hearings as well, because they really have an impact on people closest to them. So the notice, as I said earlier, we generally exceed what state law requires, and that's a policy decision by the county. With Central, for example, notice letters went out within a mile of the parcels for that project. And I brought the map and I was curious, but it's a large swath, because Central is a large, and then Pedregal and West are fairly far apart, and so that mile goes very large on what the notice is. So once you know what type of hearing you're going to have, then you have to figure out who's the appropriate decision maker. The lowest level review would be the planning and building director, and that's going to be very minor approvals, administrative permits, minor revisions to a permit, or a temporary use permit, so maybe a grade event. And these decisions can either be appealed to the planning commission or to the board. The next would be you would have a zoning administrator, and these would have a public hearing often, but they are minor use permits, conditional use permits that aren't very complicated, revisions to one of those permits or a variance. But the zoning administrator has the authority to always refer something to the planning commission. So that just happened a week ago because of the public interest in what might otherwise seem as a division of land into 3 lots. And so that was referred to the planning commission. And your next level will be the planning commission. So Commissioner Vania is your District 1 commissioner on that. It is a 5-member board appointed for each one of the districts. And those are all public hearings. The planning commission will hear conditional use permits, design review permits, development plan permits, which is a PD you might hear. And a PD gives some flexibility to depart from the strict rules of the county. So one example is the county's sign ordinance that limits how large your sign can be, how many signs you can have. With a PD, it gives some flexibility for a developer to maybe have a little bit higher of a sign or a little bit larger of a sign without having to go after a variance, which is a little more difficult to grant sometimes. And of those decisions, the PC decision is the original decision maker. So they either approve or deny that application. Anybody, though, within 10 days can appeal that to the Board of Supervisors. So then the Board of Supervisors will hear the appeal of that decision. The land use decisions I mentioned earlier were their legislative actions, where the courts have considered them legislative or policy decision actions. That's going to be with development agreements, specific plans, rezones. That authority, the original authority to make that decision, rests with the Board of Supervisors. Under the state law and county code, any decision like that is made by the Board of Supervisors, it provides to go first to the Planning Commission, where they review and make a recommendation to the board. And really one of the benefits of that is the Planning Commission is a very narrow focused body. They hear planning applications and development applications, and the calendar, I think, since I've been on, we had one that was 7, which was a long calendar, but generally, 2 to 4 items on it. So they have the time to really get into the nitty-gritty on, what might be a small lot line or where something's going or where this one tree or how that impacted. And so it has the benefit, and we have planning commissioners who invest a lot of time in reviewing all the documents and emailing their council.
That's right. Way too much.
And so you have that expertise, and you also have that time commitment. Now, when you think of if this was first heard for the first time by the Board of Supervisors, I'm sure you've all, if you're here, looked at the Board of Supervisors agenda, they can have 50 items ranging from a public safety issue to the library to ambulances to a contract for a road improvement. And so it's so diverse, and their ability to carve out multiple hours on that one hearing that day is more difficult. So it gives that benefit to really have something really examined in detail before it comes to the board for their final or for their decision in that one. And the same with an appeal. If they hear the appeal, they have the benefit of all the work that's been done at the planning commission level. So that's my plug. If you're here, I think you're interested in projects, that planning commission is the time to get involved, because that's really the time that we've already had 2 hearings on Central. We have 2 more set, but that's really the time where you can comment, and there's the luxury really of the time to make those adjustments now that sometimes it's harder when you're on the board and the calendar, has, I don't know how many items on it and several, scheduled. So that would be my plug there. But during all of this happening, right, in the public comments and the public views coming in, we also, and probably my role, probably I'm the one expressing it most of the time, is has to think about the rights of the applicant. So the applicant has due process right that comes from the federal constitution that they have the right to a fair hearing and a fair decision maker. That is a right that if they ever felt like they weren't given that with certain types of approvals, they can challenge the county that they didn't get that fair hearing or they didn't have an unbiased decision maker. One of the cases says procedural due process in the administrative setting requires that the hearing be conducted before a reasonably impartial, non-involved decision maker. And with small counties, El Dorado County relatively compared to other counties is small. So courts have recognized that John, or both Johns are going to be familiar with that. They know where Central is. They know the properties that are going to be affected. So they're not saying that you have to be completely naive or not understand the concerns of the community, but that you need to be unbiased and that you need to have an open mind and need to be listening to everything that comes in before making a decision. And so the courts have said if there's concrete facts that show that a decision maker has an unacceptable probability of actual bias, then they can be challenged for having made that decision, or they can be challenged up front saying that they don't get to be a part of that decision because they've expressed actual bias for or against a project in advance of it. An example would be, express statements attacking a project before it's even come to a hearing, and you have it as the decision maker have the chance to do that. The same thing, while due process requires a fair decision maker, it also requires everything that the county decision makers base their decision on to be available to you, to be in the public record. And so that's why the public hearings sometimes can go a long time, and you'll see so many attachments on Legistar, which is where you can pull the agenda item, because everything that they're looking at has to be available to you. Same thing if a commissioner or a supervisor went out and doing due diligence goes and visits the site, for example, or meets with the developer to talk about it. And if they obtain information that's not available on Legistar, and that's going to be a basis of their decision, then they have to disclose that under the due process laws and say, this is what I'm also considering. I walked the site and I thought the topography, looked a little bit different than I see in this map, and that's playing into my decision. That then gives the public and also the applicant the opportunity to respond to that and to rebut that. So those are 2 issues with due process that go hand in hand. And for those reasons, so that we're ensuring that there's not a claim of actual bias and that all information is considered, our office advises against any decision maker taking a position on a project before the public hearing has closed. Yeah.
It used to be that when a neighbor was planning to do something, all the neighbors were notified of that. But it's not happening anymore.
So that's what I was talking about earlier. That first step really is what level of review, and there's staff review with notice and staff review without notice, and certain approvals are considered without notice and certain aren't. So it's the zoning code that lays out what is required of notice and what's not. So if there's some approval, I mean, I don't have an example offhand, but if there's approval that doesn't require actual notice, then that's not happening. But for any development project or for, conditional use permits where the law really considers it to have an impact on neighbors, then there is notice.
Well, I think a major development like Lennar, my property actually has been notified of what they were gonna do.
And so if you look at the Legistar item on one of the last attachments normally is it's called a notification map. And for Central, this is what it looks like, but so it shows
Yes.
that. So I would guess, it sounds like you're very close to that project, that you would have, for that project, yes, you would have received notice on that.
Instead of avoid all this problem. Thank you.
So I would pull up the Legistar item and see if there's that map there. The courts do give a presumption if the county says that we followed our normal procedures, we drafted the notice, we put the notice in the mail through the normal procedures, that we are given the presumption that that notice was sent and that notice was received. Obviously, we don't have the ability to hand deliver notice to everyone, so we're relying on the Postal Service, we're relying on addresses being updated. There are other avenues too, though. You can subscribe on the county website. You can subscribe to the Planning Commission or to the board items, and then you can check the boxes you're interested in. So that there would be planning. So anytime a planning item comes before the board or for the planning, you can get an email. So that's another way, that you can always watch. Obviously, you can read agendas, but that's a big burden, I think, on anybody to constantly be reading agendas every week to see. But so that there are other avenues. Not suggesting you do that. But you can subscribe. Though. If there's areas, planning is one. If you really interested in land use, I would recommend subscribing to that because there's going to be ones that maybe are in your area directly, so you're not going to get the notice, but you might have interest in attending or staying on top of that. So that's another option as well. But I think that is all I have at this point. I can talk a little bit about Central unless there's any questions more broadly.
You talk about the agenda for next Monday's
Yep, I have that, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that'd be a good segue to let people know what's going to happen at the special planning commission hearing that'll be done in El Dorado Hills a week from today. So if you're not aware that I have it on the supervisor's comments, but Bree, I think, has some copies to share with you. So if there's questions on how that's going to proceed, what the steps are, we can answer those tonight so that there's not a false expectation of what that's all about. So we thought for clarity purposes, we wanted to make sure that that was available to people.
And I wanted to thank Steve Ferry, because I called Steve to help set that up, so thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
So as I said, Central was submitted in November 2012, so here we are over 7 years later, and where are we at now with that project? Given the nature of its entitlements, it will be decided by the Board of Supervisors. So the board will be making the decision on it, but as I said, it is the Planning Commission for the review and recommendation. We have already had two hearings, one November 14th, one December 12th. If you missed those and you're interested, you can go on the planning or the county website and pull the agenda, and there's a recording of it. So all of that is available to you. But as Supervisor Heidel said, our next meeting is in El Dorado Hills, which is not typical of most projects, but the county recognizes this is a big project with a lot of public interest and a lot of public interest in El Dorado Hills. And so that meeting is set at 6 o'clock at District Church on the 13th on Monday. And then there will be a fourth hearing for deliberation. So public comment will likely go to the chair, but will likely be closed on the 13th and then come back for a public hearing on deliberation. So it'll be open to the public, but not taking additional comment at that time. So what I did print for you, when I said Legistar, this is what Legistar is and what it looks like when you pull an item. Is everybody familiar with this, or I can kind of go over, or if would anyone like me to go over it a little bit?
Maybe just a top level
yeah.
summary, don't go through all of it.
So,
explain what it shows, yeah.
This is the main, how the project description is. I'm going to get into that later, but if you look here, here's all the attachments. So every public comment that comes in gets attached to Legistar, becomes part of the public record, and that's the public record upon which the decision makers base their decision. But you will also see the environmental impact report there. You'll see the supporting studies. You'll see the staff presentation. So everything is added to Legistar as it goes through. When public comments come in the day before, they're put up on Legistar as well. But if you flip the page over on the back of the first page, it talks about halfway down, what are they asking for at a very big picture level? What approvals, what entitlements are they seeking? So they're listed out there, but the general plan amendment, and that's partly moving to the zones of the specific plan. They're seeking to amend the El Dorado Hills specific plan, and that's what most of us would think of as Serrano. So they are seeking to take land that was zoned for development within Serrano, move it into Central, and then it would go into open space there. So there is a little bit of land switching between the plans. They are seeking the specific plan adoption, so that's the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan. Like I said, with the El Dorado Hills specific plan or Serrano, that was 1987, right? So it is a document that is supposed to be long-standing. They are seeking to rezone the property, a large lot tentative subdivision map, so that's not, like I said, you're not going to know the individual parcels. It's a large lot at this point, 6 parcels, that allows them to then finance and do that. A planned development permit, and then the development agreement itself. And so all of those documents are available on Legistar, and I believe they're going to traffic on Monday. DOT is going into some traffic issues on Monday as well, and then public comment is, I think, the primary goal, so that people in El Dorado Hills have an opportunity to comment and give input on the project. Any questions on kind of this document or at a broad level about the Central project?
I think my first suggestion would be that maybe you condense what you've said in the last 25 minutes to about 5 minutes, and that you ask Commissioner Miller or Commissioner Vega, you ask Chairman Miller to have Bree do a presentation like this for about 5 minutes, explaining to, I think, the many more people that will probably show up next Monday at the district church for the hearing about what the process involved, because I think that might answer a lot of questions people might have and might take a little angst that might be present at the meeting.
Yeah, we have a commission meeting this Thursday, and so we could talk about that a little.
And as I said, I represent the planning commission, so if you come to any planning commission meeting, I'm there obviously advising the planning commission, so I will be there, happy to do that if you'd like me to do that.
Does the plan, when they try to implement these rezoning, do they use some of the state law incentives, like, okay, we're going to put a bunch of affordable housing into this so that you can't stop us? Is that going to be part of this type of strategy that they're going to have?
I can't speak for the developer. I can tell you right now the developer is not proposing affordable housing. The developer has not proposed affordable housing at this time. There is senior housing as an option, and with senior housing, the number of units can be increased. And then if there's not senior housing, then the cap is a little bit lower. But there's not a proposal for affordable housing at this point. There's multifamily, kind of more duplex style as well.
So there's 4 categories that typically accommodate affordable housing terminology. The one they qualify is called above moderate income. So it's the one that's easiest for everybody to fulfill. So it does fulfill part of the RENA requirements for housing, but it's not what most people would consider the affordable, and it's market rate housing and not something that would encourage young families to be able to get their starter home or those kinds of things. So it's a different category. You talk about above moderate. It's the more exclusive type of housing.
And the state law that really limits the county that I referred to earlier is not on the type of that housing. It's the lower income housing that triggers the protections of state law.
And we have been talking to them about moderately priced homes for Central. So far, I don't think they have any stomach for that, but we'll continue to discuss that.
I spent a lot of years in the housing industry making home loans to people, and the moderate income they're talking about is roughly between $55,000 and about $110,000. Those are not exact numbers, they're just kind of. So people who qualify for home loans, if they qualify on income at 3 or 4% interest, which offhand I didn't see much of in my career, but they can actually qualify for some pretty good sized homes. I mean, you're talking $500,000. that they can actually get into. So it's not like you have to build some $280,000 homes or $215,000 homes to get the moderate income people into the housing that you can provide.
But to get to the very low income, the bottom run,
That's
those are
your
generally
problem. That's your
rentals,
problem, John.
and those are multifamily, and the number for a family of four ends up being a rent that's $1,000 or less per month for very low income affordable housing, and every county is supposed to cover some of that. That's our true challenge, is how do you get to that level where you can provide a reasonable housing, even if it's multifamily, at $1,000 a month rent or less. It's almost unachievable given a lot of different things that are going on, but yet the state through SACOG and the allocations we get through RENA are requiring those numbers. So
One party state.
no disagreement, Steve. We don't need to go there though. Okay, a couple more questions and then we need to kind of put a wrap on this. But
Does this list include everything that the county has received from the developer for this project?
I don't have, no, it wouldn't have, I'm trying to think of what an example.
Is there anything
So
you
a
know-
draft, well, because if
Is
you
there-
go, here's an example, if you
Is
an
there
environmental.
Is there anything that you know of, with state law, county ordinance, would allow the county to withhold from the public any information that they received from the developer on this project?
So the drafts is one example under state law. We are
Pardon?
not draft documents, so a document when it's in its draft form. So if you think of a 300-page environmental impact report, it is going to go through numerous rounds of drafts and editing and working through
So
it.
this would be, but the final.
The final
would
is
be
here, yes. I'm trying to think of what you might not see here, I think, is sometimes we'll have, I don't think, they're not there, that when they have to hire a consultant, and then we have an agreement with the consultant, that agreement isn't here, that just shows how it's paid. So there's things that when you get to, if you end up in litigation, that would be part of the administrative record, but that wouldn't be put here, documents like that. What state law requires to be here and to be considered is all going to be put up here, but you're going to have a lot of draft documents, emails, there's going to be things, so a developer might have sent us an email, that's not attached up here. So we might have asked the developer a question, what were you thinking of for this one piece? That's not there. So I don't want to say you have the entire universe because you don't.
well, let me provide one caveat. Our staff is not perfect. They do make mistakes. Everybody does. It's human, right? It's human nature.
I don't think we should make a mistake on this.
No. Let me give you an example. I know that our planning commission has found items that they believe should be part of the public record.
Okay.
That for some reason, not proper judicious review or whatever, were not included in the public record that's been put out. And the planning commission is asked to please get those placed in the public record. And our planning department has been accommodating those things. So I'm not sure what you're referring to, Buzz, specifically, but it's a checks and balances.
Specifically.
Pardon?
I say I'm not referring to anything specifically. What I want to know is just a complete listing of everything the developer, excluding drafts, everything the developer has submitted on this project.
So, and then another good example is cultural resource studies. They are not here. They are not here because state law includes us
What
from
is
putting
that?
cultural resource studies. So
Those are confidential in nature because of the sensitivity of cultural resources and people wanting to go treasure hunt, right? I mean, there's
So
reasons.
I think, yeah, my answer is no, not everything in our files or given, but if it's not there, there's a reason, there should be a reason, like Supervisor Heidel said,
But in
mistakes
this
are made.
case, there is something legally that prohibits that from being disclosed, which is, I understand.
You asked a lawyer the question, so I want to be very specific on that. But no, anything that should be there should be uploaded there. And this is planning, so I know I'm here kind of giving this presentation, but this is all run through the planning office. Our office is obviously involved in reviewing that, but we aren't maintaining that or putting the documents up or reviewing every document that comes through either.
Question. This central project includes two uniquely different components. One is a piece of property that has been zoned residential for a long time. The other has been zoned open space recreational. The fact that there are two dissimilar origins, I'll use that word, does that impact in any way the ability to be looking at both of them at the same time in this
So I think if I can kind of break it down a little bit, the reason that the projects are combined is because that's how the developer brought the project to us. So it's not the county decision, wasn't a county decision to combine those under one specific plan. I think that's also why you're seeing so many hearings, because there are so many issues that I know Planning Commission has tried when they're working on it to say, let's talk about Pedregal or let's talk about Central. It's interesting to me, and I see that they're different. I see that point being made. Normally from CEQA, the county's challenged, and we're being concerned from the opposite side. So the challenges you see under CEQA, it's called piecemealing or segmenting, but you take a big project and you chunk it up into little projects because your traffic isn't going to trigger, 10 trips for that Measure ELOS, or you're not going to trigger a need for a big improvement because you've taken a big project and broken it up. So from a CEQA standpoint, I see a good argument. They brought us a big project, and if we start breaking that up, now we piecemeal it, so now the traffic counts are going to go down, and there might be impacts that we might not otherwise have if we didn't look at it globally, and the idea of it is globally. It was a developer decision, and they are doing some swaps with densities between the two properties, and so there was an incentive for them. They have said at the hearings that that's also what allows them to do the development agreement and to have certain pieces of the development agreement because it is such a large project. But that has been a concern that's been brought to the Planning Commission several times about why. I think my main response is really because the developer brought it to us that way. And I probably at one point would have had concern if we start breaking up a project that was brought to us, because that's where the CEQA challenges are, is breaking it up. But I do think it does put a burden on Planning Commission and the supervisors that when we have 4 appearances at Planning Commission, because it is a big project and there's unique impacts and unique considerations for each piece of it.
And I addressed that you were there at the first hearing. My concerns along those lines, but then as Bree described, and also I talked to Tiffany in my staff meeting with her, that, okay, if you bring them in together, then you can see how they work, between themselves, interactively and so forth. But then the other side of it, maybe the third side, right, is because it's such a large project, they're doing a large lot final map, and then they're going to come in later once they get their entitlements and then do the individual subdivisions. So I've got some concerns along those lines because you're going to have further impacts that are going to be identified and mitigated down the road when the individual maps come in. So they're kind of taking a high-level look at this point, and those are some of the concerns that I've expressed about possibly splitting them up. So there's can be disadvantages and advantages depending on how you do it.
And Tiffany here is our county director of planning and building, because obviously planning is a major part of this. The building, not so much yet, but the planning definitely is, so that's why you mentioned conveying or communicating with Tiffany as well as with Bree and other people. Because that's his role, is to try to gather all the information he can, as best as he can understand it, and ask the questions that the public would ask on their behalf to try to really do some fact-finding to determine what are the hard constraints, what are the formal proposals, what are the options that might be available, is there conformance? That's the role of the Planning Commission. When it gets to the Board of Supervisors, that review should have already been finalized. There should be a recommendation to the board to break some of those things down. Sometimes there's additional conditions that are imposed that the board needs to consider. Are those reasonable adds to what the project was to make it the best project it can be, given all the other constraints? And the answer is generally yes. But it's a formal process, and everybody has their role. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The board's role, as Bree said, is to not spend hours and hours and hours going back through the stuff the Planning Commission went through. And we don't have the time for that. It's to use their knowledge, their guidance, their recommendations, parse it, spend the time on the things we think are the most sensitive, critical parts of it, and then make a decision. But you should go through all of that before you make a decision.
And a perfect example is the Vineyards project, where back in November we heard that and we approved it, but we had no public comments. We had no one show up.
Well, CSD showed up.
Well, okay, to be specific, well, the CSD provided. When I say public, I meant you public that live out there and so forth. We did have John and his group at APAC provided two separate submittals, and then the CSD as well. But we had none of the neighbors provided any comments in writing, nor provided any testimony at the planning commission, but then they came out like gangbusters at the board meeting. And so we really, truly want your input at the planning commission. And, because we truly want to be able to vet these things out, and we do, you know. And so, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about vineyards. So that's a perfect example.
So, any final questions for Bree? Because I do want to.
The last one. Does CEQA consider the recreational value of the land in the county relative to the issue of environment?
CEQA has a section on recreation, but it is not the impact of the project to recreation. So I'm going to use a good example was the Mosquito Bridge, and the complaint was that we were affecting their ability to raft down the bridge. And I strongly took the position that that's not what CEQA is looking at. CEQA is not looking at our project as putting any bridge impact on that. It does look at, in that recreation section, the project's impact on recreational facilities. So if you're going to run down a park that's existing, or you're going to, make the pool here so crowded that you can't use it. So it looks at that, the project's impact on recreation facilities and the availability of that. Our general plan has different, obviously, pieces of open space in there. Does that answer that? So it's a flip.
It's not the
Maybe
requirements
the
of
right
residential.
answer. I just wonder whether the recreational values of the county is an asset that has to be considered.
On CEQA. So CEQA, so the open space. So keeping that land as ability to have a golf course there, or something else.
Recreation.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think of how to phrase it as an impact on the environment. So if that open space was habitat for an endangered species, now, CEQA's extremely interested in that, or it has wetlands in it, or there's some environmental impact. Aesthetics, open space, offers you aesthetics, and so, if it was going to wipe out a view line on it, and there's public trails that go through there, CEQA does look at that. There's a case where, I forget there was some type of water structure, but there was some public trails, and we took away the views, I believe, of the beach. And so CEQA does look at that piece of it, public views, so there's ways to get there. I don't know if just the open space in itself without kind of linking it to some environmental impact, but I can continue to think about it.
So I think Gavin had his hand up to take one.
I did. For the two parts, one zone for housing, one zone for open area, when does the rezoning process come into play?
So that's at the board approval. So if you look at the agenda item I gave you, that's one of the items there is to rezone. So that's when the rezone would happen at that approval. It doesn't mean the houses come right away. Those approvals keep coming, but the rezone would happen with this project right now.
And there will be public input for rezone.
Yes, and that's where the encouragement is to come next Monday, come to the planning commission process and make that public contributions and influence now while really the planning commission is.
But the board of supervisors will also conduct a public hearing where you take public testimony on things. So there's that next series of hearings, or a single hearing, depends on what it is. The size of the project is somewhat dependent upon whether it has to be continued or it can be resolved. But there's not only the opportunity of the planning commission, but there will be an opportunity for public input at the board hearings.
Thank you.
When is that board of supervisors hearing? Has that been scheduled?
It hasn't been scheduled because of the indefinite time frame at which the planning commission will finish their work up. And then it's going to take a little while for our planning department. So speculative is probably not into March. It's probably March would be my earliest guess.
There was at the end of the day today, they were doing a placeholder. I mean, placeholders are very uncertain, but March 10th was and the earliest one of when it would be done at planning commission and bring it up. But that could change, and it would be agendized and noticed, and so don't write that date down and show up expecting it. That could change, but that was an internal staff work discussion.
Okay. Last call. Anything that's a pressing question for Bree? One last one, then we're going to cut it off. So go ahead.
I have a question mainly for the planning commission, because
he's here.
Yeah, right. I feel that all these projects that are building homes are going to have inhabitants that have children in the home. So I'm wondering if you don't have in that big thick book some sort of law that says, okay, builder, if you build 20 new homes, you have to put X number of dollars into the local school or school buildings.
So Mitigation Fee Act and the mitigation requirements does require anybody taking out a building permit to pay fees to the county for our mitigations, to special districts. They pay it to the county, but it goes to the fire department, to CSD, for instance, in El Dorado Hills, and also for schools. So those mitigation impacts are defined, and when they progress a project to approval, there's some conditions set as to when those fees have to be paid, and that's collected through our planning department. So yes, is the answer.
And you, even if you do a home improvement where you add more than 500 square feet, you'll be paying school fees. So you even for a home improvement, so as well.
And the county does not run the schools, so they're separate under state law. The school districts are separate than the county, so we don't. But I mean, I know I pay boundaries for the schools in my house where I live, so it does look at that.
Thank you, Bree. That was excellent. I think that really I'm going to move quickly through the supervisor communications. Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you.
And I call this or term this the year of perfect vision, 2020 eyesight. So everything is going to get better this year because we have better views of what's going on, right? So I think that's a positive way to look at the year. Second thing I want to mention was the public hearing that will be held at the district church. A week from today at 6 p.m. it starts, so we've already heard about that. So that's just a reminder. The Vineyards project review, for those of you who have been kind of following what happened with the Board of Supervisors when that came forward, that was continued. And it was continued to a time certain date, so it didn't linger forever. But since that point in time, which I think it was set for January, whatever it was, the proponents have come forward and say, we want an extension. We want more time to work this. I'm hoping that means more public outreach, more discussion, more possible mitigations that can be put in place. But I don't know what their intent is, but they said, we want this extended until at least February or March. So that's the change I wanted to mention, that the board make a decision, but that's overridden by the project proponents saying, we want more time than that. So when it's agendized again, it comes back, it will come to the board, not the planning commission. So if you're tracking that one, be aware that date will be set, will be noticed in the registrar at some point in the future. Saratoga Iron Point Road, the connection, the opening of that, we've been talking about, hopefully it's going to happen. Hopefully the last date I got from our DOT director was the middle of January, but the developer ACLA is saying no way. The safety aspects of their work crew that's working in that area, they can't allow it in their opinion. So we're now talking about the end of February. So this is one of those things that stretched out and stretched out, but it's not because of bureaucratic drawing the lines out. It's because the developer has told us he feels it's an unsafe environment if they open that up with temporary signalization, trailers, and all that stuff. They want to get it done right, and they want to do it, safe in a safe manner for their employees. So that's why that's stretched out. I know there's a lot of people with angst over that, including people in Folsom, but can't do anything to change that. The last one I wanted to mention, actually there's two of them, there's one I didn't get on here. SB 50. There's state legislature is looking at a new bill. It's a modification actually of the previous Senate Bill 50, which is brought forward by Senator Wiener. If you know, I think it's Wiener, I don't know how to pronounce it, W-I-E-N-E-R. But he has been, for the last 3 or 4 years, pushing legislation to take over local control on decisions of land use relative to multifamily housing in particular. He now has another one here, and there was a request that I received from a group called Livable California to get involved to hold simultaneous town halls across the state, etc. We can't do a town hall, so I told him I would announce it here. But basically, as I read it, subject to change, because these things start out in one format and the end is something totally different. But what he's essentially talking about is unilateral ability for the state to approve projects that are multifamily, high-density housing without the local communities or the local government having any voice in it. If they determine that a project needs to be put in place, they'll waive CEQA and they'll do whatever it takes to build that affordable housing element within your community. So I would encourage all of us to track Senate Bill 50. If you're really concerned with that, get involved. But as Bria said, there's a lot of pressure continually from the state for more and more affordable housing. And they're starting to put some teeth with this, and they threaten punishment to counties who don't do it, i.e. withholding road maintenance funds, which is our gas tax money. You can call it an idle threat if you want. I don't believe that. I believe that they will do what they can to punish counties and cities who don't comply at some level. Do you have to do everything? No. But I don't think it's an idle threat, because we've seen this like 4 years in a row. There's more and more push to try to do this. Last year it was high density housing, multifamily relative to transit centers and or big places of employment. And they're now saying that isn't even a requirement. The state can decide where they think that affordable housing should go, and you have to comply with it. You have to accept it. So will it be modified? Yes. To what? I have no idea. But just recognize there's a constant threat that the state is making for a push to mandate affordable housing beyond our ability to control it locally. So get involved, understand it, voice your opinion, voice your discontent, whatever it may be, but it all comes down to what legislature approves and what the governor signs, right? So we do live in California. The last thing I wanted to mention, and maybe a little positive note, is that there is tax assistance preparation, particularly for seniors. So AARP has a tax assistance program that they run every year. It's for immediate release in terms of the information, but between February 1st and April 15th, there will be tax preparation services provided free to seniors who qualify, and there's a number of different areas identified. Fosterville Senior Center. Last year I thought there was one in El Dorado Hills, and I don't see El Dorado Hills this year. So maybe that meant nobody in El Dorado Hills needed assistance from AARP in preparing their taxes. I don't know. But for people who do, that is a free service that's available. We have the information. Contact my office if you're interested, and we can give you the dates and the time frames that they're talking about, what the phone numbers are, the contact information. Because I do think that's important, particularly to some of our seniors who are on fixed income, but yet they still need to file a tax return if they can get help and assistance from somebody, and it's free. And I happen to believe AARP is a pretty good organization of trying to represent seniors. I mean, I'm sure there's cases where people weren't happy with something that happened there, but it's a service that's available. People just need to be aware of that and take advantage of it to the extent that they should. So.
They used to have it at the senior center, but they didn't feel that they had the privacy needed.
Okay.
I think they did it at CSD last year.
So if there's a privacy issue, sometimes there's things we could work out, between the county facilities or whatever, but I hadn't heard that was a constraint, but thank you, Margie, for that input. But that's the last thing I want to make comment on. So if there are any questions of me before we move into kind of the normal review of what's going on with the leadership team activities? Okay, seeing none, then why don't we start on this end for a change, and we'll start with our planning commissioner and infrastructure and work towards the other ends. Because I don't see law enforcement here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. So let's do law enforcement first. So our CHP representative is here. So excuse me for not recognizing you entered the room. We'll start with that because he has other duties, right? So thanks again.
It's okay, I'm wearing dark and I'm sitting in the back corner. Anyone need to stretch? Blood clots are a real threat. Okay, so I'm going to take the next hour and a half, 2 hours. Thank you. How sequel applies. No. Okay. So I'm going to start off today's kind of update for you with state updates. We had a couple of holidays happen this month from the last meeting that we had, New Year's and Christmas. So for New Year's, we had our maximum enforcement period. The numbers hashed out for statewide, it is about 491 DUI arrests within CHP jurisdiction. So that's about 16 an hour that we had. And comparing those to last year we had a 102-hour MVP, maximum enforcement period. This year we had only a 30-hour maximum enforcement period. So last year, Christmas and New Year's were both 4-day weekends, quote unquote. So this year 2. So 3 deaths in CHP jurisdiction during the new year. That's amazing, and we're very proud of that. Over Christmas, we had 271 DUI arrests and 10 deaths in CHP jurisdiction, which is unfortunate, but that's a sad Christmas for those families. And we just want to encourage everyone to bring it more local or regional. We just had a fatality collision on the 4th up off of Pleasant Valley Road. Both persons in the car. One person died. Both persons in the car were not wearing their seatbelt. And every maximum enforcement period, we always have to reinforce the issue that about 50% of the people that died on California's roads were not wearing their seatbelts. Seatbelts save lives. Unfortunately, here in El Dorado County, and it is anecdotal what I'm saying now, but Officer Smith, my predecessor, and myself, El Dorado County seems to be rife with scofflaws for seatbelt laws. So wear your seatbelt. If your friends and family don't, get on, because it's a real simple thing, and compliance is very high, and why not you? So locally, John brought up, Supervisor Heidel brought up, there's an issue with cutting through on Via Treviso, Via Farlagio, and Montridge. So we deployed additional units out there, utilizing the grant funding to accomplish that enforcement on those dates. And so we've increased enforcement in that location in radar deployments. Our radar trailer, unfortunately, when it gets wet, it has some trouble. So we need to figure out how to dry that thing off, because it's still wet. So we're having a little bit of issue with our radar trailer, but we're getting that resolved. It seems to be a seasonal issue. But enforcement was successful.
Thank you for that.
And we're out there and we're listening to you. Additionally, I just want to reinforce that we're available for public comment, concern, whether it be social media or a telephone call. If you have an issue in your neighborhood and you want to talk about it with me, and you might not know who to call, but I'll give you a phone number, or it might be me, and I'll tell you who to call or direct you where to go. And most people, the police or the fire department is their kind of number one touchstone of government in their lives, and so I want to be that resource to direct you either to where you want to go, or maybe solve the problem for you with that phone call. So don't be afraid to call if you have a traffic concern in your neighborhood or around your house. Also, for grant education programs that we have going on, we have a Start Smart program, 2 in February 5th and February 26th. That's for new drivers, maybe one in this room, and new drivers and those who are about to become drivers, 15 to 18-year-olds, and it's a class given up at our CHP office. I will be calling Lilienthal later, because our classes get really full and we need a bigger venue. So we'll be having some classes hopefully in March down here at Station 5. Follow us on Facebook. That's how you're going to get notification of when those classes are, what time they are, and where they are. Okay? Any questions for me, concerns, comments for the California Highway Patrol? Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. Could you just go over a little bit how the radar trailer works? What its function is?
Sure, so I can give you a 40-hour course on radar. I'm a host with a certification.
Sure.
I'm ready to go. So the radar trailer is it's basically a metal box, and it contains the guts of the radar counting instrumentation, display board, and an antenna. The antenna uses radio waves to determine the speed of a vehicle. So it's deployed out there. If you have a concern, you want to deploy in your neighborhood, give me a call. Or go on Facebook, send me a message, or send me an email. I have a couple of cards, I'll leave them on the back of the table. But our senior volunteers typically do deploy it, and they actually maintain it. We have some pretty savvy, technologically savvy senior volunteers that keep that thing going. But getting out there, putting it out there, it just notifies people of how fast they're going. Because a lot of times, people just don't know. You get into that habit of your local road and you're going down your local road and you just think, oh, whatever. But it's 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. But turns out you're averaging probably 45. That's a little too fast for that zone. So just for the locals, being notified of how fast you're going. And there's a star on that white box, and it just reminds you the highway patrol's around. We're here to help you out. Yes, sir.
Do you have any updates on THC measurements? Is there any legal things that are happening? Because now that we've legalized it, it's an intoxicant. And when you add it to alcohol, it's big problems.
Right.
Are there going to be any new laws or any ideas? Because there's a new company that's going to be able to measure that.
So there are a couple of companies, more than one company that's trying to put out for law enforcement to purchase presumptive tests for THC, or marijuana impairment. That's what THC refers to, just marijuana impairment. We know with drug and alcohol impairment, 1 + 1 is not equal to, 1 + 1 could equal a lot more. We as a department haven't taken a stance necessarily on presumptive limits. So a presumptive limit means 0.08 blood alcohol level, you're intoxicated. We do not have a presumptive limit for marijuana THC levels in your blood for DUI. And in fact, recent studies are coming out that we actually don't want that. And it has a lot to do with metabolization rates, tolerance for that specific person, and our main concern as a department is impairment. And there's nothing new under the sun. We've been doing it for decades on determining impairment with marijuana and THC. And so we are still utilizing those tried and true methods, and they're very effective. We are getting marijuana-only DUI convictions in this county on a regular basis, and that was unheard of even 10 years ago. Marijuana-only DUI was not very common in the state to be prosecuted by district attorneys. Our district attorney is brave, and our district attorney rolls forward with it, and we get those convictions often. So our department hasn't taken a step into that. We are looking into it. It's a huge thing. It's, I'd say, our bread and butter. We're not taking an inactive role in it. We're taking a very active role in it. We have units. New laws. Recently, 23152.5 of the vehicle code passed. Was written by a retired CHP officer, and it allows the highway patrol, specifically the California Highway Patrol, to allow impaired drivers to operate a motor vehicle on CHP property, so the academy. And the CHP, and this is kind of a brave new world that we're entering into. This is something brand new that anything on the West Coast doesn't even come close to this. So we're able to do studies on impaired drivers behind the wheel, high and or drunk, when technically by law it's not legal to do that, even on private property. So you mowing your lawn and you're riding a lawnmower, can't be above a 0.08 blood alcohol. Sorry, if you were to crash, you'd be taken course. So private property, motor vehicle, DUI applies. So we were never ever able to, in a legal way, get somebody over 0.08 blood alcohol level or high and put them behind a wheel to study them. Now we can. So this new law is huge for the department and also for universities to come into our state, utilize facilities. Right now it's in the infancy. We're developing policy and procedures. So it's going to be fun.
What about federal land?
Federal land, there's no DUI federal law. So California law applies in every part of the national forest, though. So don't think you can be DUI on the national forest. Any other questions, concerns?
Phone number is?
Our office, 530-748-2450. And I'm there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. If you need to call me after that, it's a 3-digit number.
Would you mind restating your name, sir?
Yeah, Andrew Brown.
Thank you.
Yeah, and our dispatch non-emergency number, this is for an active incident, ongoing, but it's not an emergency. It's area code 916-861-1300, 1300, 861-1300. That'll get you to my dispatch center.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
I'll leave some cards on the back table for you.
So let's let public safety finish up. So Chief, did you have anything else to add? I don't think there's anybody here from the Sheriff's Department, right?
No, we didn't get any sheriff's representatives today.
Let's finish here and then we'll go.
Yeah, so again, Michael Williams with the Dorado Hills Fire Department. You know, we're getting ready to start our 2020 kind of major initiatives. The chief's here, a couple of our board members are here, which is nice. We stay involved as much as we can with the community, and we like to do that. Some big events for us going on this year is we're looking at any opportunity we can to enhance and increase our response times. Meaning, how fast can we get to your house when you have a problem? So we have a communications study we're doing. The chiefs led us on that with our board, and we're going to be looking at opportunities to enhance our communication side. How quickly we get calls, how quickly we get out the door, the technology we use to get to your house. So really good stuff from our perspective. It should allow us to deliver services better. We're also working on our training center. It's a project that's been in the works for over 20 years. That's moving forward. And we just re-upped our shared services agreement with Rescue Fire Department. So we not only provide service in the Latrobe area and the El Dorado Hills area, but Fire Chief Johnson is also the Chief of Rescue Fire Department in a way to streamline services and be more efficient. We're sharing resources in that manner. So good for our community and good for the rescue community as well. It's mutually beneficial viewpoint. Other than that, the holidays were good, but there was a lot of really complex vehicle accidents. We had several vehicles go off the side of the roadways and hit trees. Very complicated extrications, and I know we're proud of our crews because they had, one extrication where a car went off the side of the road and took out a tree, was partially hanging in the air. Very complex, person very seriously injured. It took over an hour to cut this person out of the vehicle, which for us is a very long incident. So crews are doing a great job. They're training a lot this year, and we're looking forward to 2020. Any questions for the fire department? Yes, sir.
How's the training center coming?
The training center, the chief in this last year, his chief's finished 1 year here. They've refreshed the project and it's moving forward again and back on track. And I believe that you'll be looking for community type meetings coming up, I understand. So there might be an opportunity to come and look at the project now. Very similar to what you've seen, some minor enhancements and moving it forward again.
If I remember correctly, visiting your website a while back, I didn't see a listing of recent incidents. Is that still the case?
We, in our board report, which is under our board documents link on our website, do post a monthly operations report that you can take a look at. I can certainly show you where that's at.
So you don't post it on a website?
It is on our edhfire.com public website.
Yes,
sir. Yeah, I can show you.
Yeah, it's not currently on the website, but as we revamp our website, that's one of the things we'll look to is putting, significant incidents on there. It's called what?
The board packet monthly, which I can show you, you can at least look at the operations report, so you'll be able to see that.
Yeah, Chief. You and I have spoken about evacuation plans. As a result of the Camp Fire and other major fires that seem to be a regular seasonal or almost yearly occurrence now in California. And I know you're working specifically for El Dorado Hills, but and this is maybe more for Supervisor Heidel. It might be nice to get the sheriff or someone from the sheriff's department to come down, be a guest speaker at one of these meetings, and explain the sheriff's role on OES, Office of Emergency Services, which is under his control per the Board of Supervisors going back to the 1990s. I'm really concerned about there doesn't seem to be any published evacuation plans from the Sheriff's Department, the Office of Emergency Services, for the entire county. And I know that our fire department is working on specifically for El Dorado Hills, but it's a countywide issue. And if a fire happens, we could have everyone, west of Placerville coming down this way, and we're all trying to get on the same roads at the same time without evacuation plans that are at least published or suggested. People aren't going to know where to go.
And so there has been a board presentation on that very subject, and before the retirement occurred, there was commitments that they were working on developing an interactive map that would show evacuation routes, not necessarily a plan. Because as you might imagine, it's hard to prepare a plan with not knowing what the circumstances were going to be, and you don't want to send somebody the wrong direction, right? So the idea was this interactive map would show where a fire has been started, which way it's spreading, what kind of velocity it has, what areas have mandatory evacuations, what areas are likely to be affected, so people can get as much advanced visibility as possible and choose to say, okay, I'm leaving now because I don't want to wait till they do the mandatory. I just as soon get everything packed and leave now and not be subject to that. Because these fires can spread at incredible rates anymore, given the conditions we've had recently. And the records setting type, what I consider to be furnace type situations, right? I mean, it gets going, the wind gets going, creates its own environment, and whoop, it just happens and takes over, everything explodes, so to speak. That's not typical of what we fought in terms of fires within California up until about the last 3 years. So it's somewhat a new phenomenon, how fast these things spread and what the evacuation needs are. But I think it's a great suggestion. We will invite the Sheriff's Department, OES, but I understand they're kind of going through some reorganization with the retirement of the lead guy. Some of the stuff that we thought was going to be coming down the pike seems to have stalled somewhere, and I don't know exactly why. And I can understand if there's changes in responsibility and they're finding somebody to be the new lead and whatever, but we have to figure that out. And we will certainly agendize that for a future meeting and invite them if they're willing to come and talk to it. Because I agree with you, it's a very important subject. But in my particular case, what I've looked at is, I want to make my own decisions. I just want to know, where is that fire? How fast is it moving? Is it coming at me? And I can pretty much determine it's time to leave versus waiting until somebody comes and knocks on my door, because it may not be most opportune. Because if all the other cars left early, the roads are blocked up. So don't wait to be the last person out would be my advice. But I don't want to have to wait for somebody to tell me, hey, you have to evacuate, and here's the way you want to go. I want to be self-assertive in terms of defining it's time to pack up and leave, and here's why. Because that's the safer way to approach it. So I'm hoping that information is available to people, and they don't have to wait for a reverse 911 call or a code red call or whatever, but they have visibility of what is that fire and how quickly is it progressing. Because the speed of these things is the thing that it's the dynamic that's changed so much in the last 3 or 4 years, and I don't see that slowing down until the soil moisture content accumulates over a period of time with a series of rainfalls, and we stay out of the drought, and all those things can happen to get us back to a more normal state, but we still have lots of fuels available. And so it takes oxygen, and it takes fuel, and it takes a combustion source, right? And once you get those things going with the wrong set of parameters, high winds, that's
John,
what
I might add, there is active conversation because there are multiple components to it. So one is, I think, the sheriff's apprehension is it's a public safety component. As they're trying to evacuate folks, they don't want that necessarily to be published because they don't want those routes to be taken as well. And so I think there's multiple components. One is the law enforcement side of things or Office of Emergency Services, but there's also the fire side of things where we will do the evacuation planning, temporary refuge areas. These are safe places. These are meeting locations. Those are the things that we can interact with the sheriffs and all of our other regional partners. And then the other piece is it is tremendously expensive and time consuming to put those together, but we have to have that focus. So with the sheriff's department, local fire agencies, the Fire Chiefs Association, we're having those conversations and we're hoping to move something forward. And the sheriff has been open to having that conversation.
And I will say OES has been very involved with the PSPS process because they're our primary interface with PG&E, for instance, when they're going to do the public safety power shutdowns. And that's a huge task to try to coordinate all that and anticipate what the impacts are, to take people who are immobile, that may be on some kind of electrical system for life support, and then your power goes out and you don't know how long and you're not notified. And so they put a lot of effort into that. So I'm not saying that they're remiss in not doing their job. They have to prioritize and do the things they have to do. But there's been a number of new things put on their plate. And that's a tough thing to accommodate in a short period of time. Because the PSPSs are something I never would have imagined 3 or 4 years ago, getting to this point, right? It's kind of like, really? We have to contend with these things? So everybody's struggling to try to figure out how do we address that through legislation, through bankruptcy courts, through whatever it is, to try to get a better environment in the future. But I don't think it's going to turn in a year's period of time. There's going to be a lot of work that has to be done, and unfortunately we didn't get started early enough with the processes to make that happen. And I'm speaking we as the state and everybody else involved, where we're at, and we've got to work our way out of it. So I know OES has put a lot of time into things like PSPS communication. So give them credit for the stuff that they truly are focusing on.
I just think their concern is if you're a bad guy and you want to do a lot of bad, you can see by having some of those things published how they can do that. And so you're basically saying, this is our plan, here it is. And so that's what we want to avoid. But there is a way to identify the temporary refuge areas, safe places and those things. And that's what we're working on for 2020.
The routes and the game that you can get into, that's everything. So
we want to educate now, though, our public as to a lot of people go home, they take the same streets and same turns, it's their norm. We do want to work out an outreach on there is another option in a lot of cases. There's another way in. And it sounds simple, but a lot of times we'll see it on vehicle accidents, roads are closed. People but I always go left down Dorado Hills Boulevard and right on St. Andrews or whatever it is, the travel direction. Well, you can go other directions, so we're going to try and use some level of education just to be alert to these other opportunities. Definitely concerned. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Are the men at the fire department and women still going to go into the seniors' homes to change the batteries in their fire?
Yep, they did just earlier today. I heard them going into a house with chirping smoke alarms. The great thing about the El Dorado Hills Fire Department, truly, and I have worked elsewhere where it wasn't quite as customer friendly, is that if you call and you have any level of concern, we will send an engine to your house if it's a fire-related issue. And of course, the great thing is if there's a higher priority call, if there's a medical emergency, they'll divert that engine that's closest to that medical emergency and send somebody else to you. But we are happy to go to anyone's house in the community at any time, day or night, help them up out of bed, anything you need, you call and we're willing to help you.
So it's not just replacing the batteries, it's installing the systems if you need a NOx detector or something, carbon dioxide, I should say. carbon dioxide detector. The department has those and they will install them and make them active for you to protect your safety. Carbon monoxide, excuse me, carbon monoxide. CO, carbon monoxide. CO2 is what comes out of the Anything else on public safety?
Just one quick question. Some of the insurance companies have taken it upon themselves to contract with private firefighters to protect insured properties and make operations. What's the fire department's feelings on that issue? I realize it's going to be mitigating circumstances in any major issue, but I'm curious if, I've spoken about this before, the last time I heard, we're going to exclude those people, we're not going to allow them on scene at all. Is that still a policy at this point?
The complicating factor with the private fire agency is a lot of times the incident command that's running a fire. The big fire agencies that are working with multiple entities don't know that they've deployed these resources individually to these homes. And I know down in Malibu most recently or last year that was an issue where a lot of private homes that were big expensive homes have their own private fire protection there. So the key is communication between the parties. The fire department, unless they're available and they're at the incident command post and we know they're there, they're not a resource we're even aware. They're going in at the insurance company's request, protecting these homes. So what happens in the field is they're just not counted as a resource if you don't know that they're there at present. That's kind of the best answer I can give you.
It really becomes a safety issue also, right? So we know what the training is for any firefighter that's getting deployed to these incidents. However, some of the private companies, you don't know where they're getting those firefighters, you don't know what their qualifications are, you don't know any of that. And like Chief Lillienthal said, you have no accountability for those firefighters on your scene because they don't check in like all the other firefighters. So if you go to the incident command center, the incident command post, they know where every single firefighter is, they have accountability of everybody. But if you have these private firefighters that are out there, their single focus is going to be a home or two, or our focus is going to be an entire neighborhood or community.
I fully understand that. The question is, would you exclude those people in totality?
I think what we want to do is we want to get them to be more interactive and more ingrained with what it is that we do, because it's not just here's a fire, everybody run and go to it. There's a process by which we're successful because we track everybody. So if they can come under that system, they could be functional. PG&E is a perfect example. PG&E's done a really good job of hiring qualified firefighters and getting involved with the incident command system.
Yeah, they're collaborating with us. They really become a liability because they're not. We have to account for them as a potential risk if they get burned over. And if we don't have common communications, that will be.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, so collaboration there at that level would almost be interesting at a grander level to have.
It's difficult.
Right.
I wonder if there any kind of qualifications that anybody talked about having these organizations, not these organizations, but the companies to provide the private firefighting services have some kind of qualifications behind them before they can actually participate in that function.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's qualifications, just like post for law enforcement that's already out there. However, with volunteer fire agencies and whatnot, it's tough to even make sure that the professional firefighters are meeting that standard, let alone private agencies that are really in for profit, and they get people from all over the place. And so they might not even be from California, or our rules and regs are a little bit different.
So given the hour, I want to move on, but thank you for all the questions and stuff, and they'll be back next month if you have some more questions, so please continue the dialogue, so to speak. But I would like to turn it over to infrastructure now and start kind of running through the reports if we can.
Breeds wrestling over here. We get along great. She keeps us out of trouble most of the time. We listen to her most of the time. We have to maintain some individuality. So Supervisor Heidel was his idea, not mine. On the vineyards, so if anyone has any questions on that, we heard that in late October, I believe. And so I don't want to bore you with the details unless you have any specific questions on that. Been reading a lot of interesting things on social media concerning that. I'll leave it at that. But I wish we would have the opportunity, again, as I mentioned earlier, to hear some of those comments, and so we could address those things. So I guess that will sort itself out, so at the board. So any specific questions or comments concerning that? Just wanted to make myself available. Yeah, I like that.
All right, thank you.
And just one more reminder, next Monday, we'll be at the district church, and that's above the movie theaters, the church up there. And I did not schedule the specific date to coincide with the national championship of college football. My idea, so I just finally put one and one together. So set your recorders.
It wasn't Monday Night Football either, so.
Yeah. So set your recorders and please show up. And if you see me glancing down at something on the desk, I'm sure it's not. I'm not checking the score at all. So, but that meeting is going to be devoted to primarily we want to hear from the public. That's why the board asked us to do that at nighttime, so people who would normally have an opportunity to come and speak at the Planning Commission can do so. We'll probably have some informational stuff that's shared at the beginning towards that, but we wanted to really dedicate a majority of that meeting to hearing from the public. And we have it on our calendar. We have a calendar, you know, when we plan ahead and when, you know, what items are going to be on future planning commissions. And I think we'll probably be having our last meeting at the end of January, the 4th Thursday, tentatively, where we will be making our decision and forwarding our recommendation on the board of supervisors. So, any other general questions? Yes.
Is there a place we can go to get a synopsis of the developer's proposal and the options?
Yeah, they have on the
kind of sorting through all
attachments.
this stuff is pretty
All
hard.
those wonderful attachments that Bree showed you and so forth, they have what they call a staff report. And so you can click on that, and that gives just an overall general summary of what the project proponent is requesting and so
That's
forth.
the staff report?
There's a staff, it's all hyperlinked here.
Yes.
So you can go to the staff report. There's also a PowerPoint by staff, and there's the applicant's PowerPoint as well, which, you know, is if you want like a total bird's eye view of those PowerPoints. The staff.
Let me suggest the Reader's Digest version, the quick and dirty, is the APAC meeting where it was presented, and it's actually a videotape. When you present, you know, the proponents get up and talk about what the project is, the public has some comment. If you want just a quick view of what it is, high level, that's what I would recommend.
And I could also say that on the APAC website, on our homepage, one of the links at the very top says current project and review. The only project under review right now is Central Dorado, and it links to the documents, and all the documents in our Registrar, with the exception of probably the public comments that came out today, are somewhere on that page. So you can go through there. Sometimes it's hard to find in Registrar, but if you go to the calendar and look at what's on the Planning Commission agenda, there's a link for the project next to the agenda number 2. Same documents, you can get them from there. I will say, to John's point, this is a unique opportunity for the community because these things don't typically happen outside of a government office or out in the field, as it were. So if you support a project, oppose a project, have concerns, questions, it's important to show up. This is a unique opportunity, and we should take advantage of it. And the other thing I would say is that keep in mind that when you're there making comments and asking questions, you can ask your questions. The planning commissioners are not going to respond to your questions. They're going to take that in, and it's for their evaluation, their consideration. They might ask staff, and they might ask the applicant a follow-up as the public comments close. But so if you're going there and you're going to ask a question and point a finger, you're typically not going to get an answer. But if you stick around and wait for the follow-up, you might. So.
Well, and we as commissioners, we have the freedom to ask you questions if we want to qualify your comments and so forth. So, Frank, do you have a question?
Well, and just to maybe build on what you just said, I think that would be a great thing to include, as you mentioned earlier, at the front end of your hearing next week.
Yeah, I talked to the chairman.
About why we're doing it, and Bree did a little mini session, which she did, as well as comment on.
We'll follow
comments
the
on
chairman.
the audience. We're not going to answer them right there.
Yeah, I talked to Chairman Miller 2 days ago, and we'll follow up with him at the Planning Commission meeting. So, and I also wanted to commend Sel, did a couple of nice write-ups in the paper, so on this project. So, and more to come, huh?
The staff report's number 32, just to say you can probably.
On the long list, yeah.
And then the PowerPoints they mentioned are 17 and 18. So.
And we've been working with staff, and we're going to continue to work with staff on these attachments. We'd like to see them standardized more, you know, where We'd love to see public comments in one location where you can click on that and have it open up, you know, a new section. So we have made some progress where we don't just see attachment A through Z and so forth. We actually have things like the environmental document or the traffic study, those kind of things. Because, you know, for folks who don't do this all the time and stuff, we want to make it as user-friendly as possible. And so that's going to be an ongoing process, but we want to try to simplify this process more and more, so we get more people interested and involved, and you know, at the end of the day, end up with better projects as a result.
So I want to piggyback on John Davies' comment. This is unique because it took board action to get the special hearing by the Planning Commission and the board direction of the Planning Commission to conduct that in El Dorado Hills in an evening time frame. Likewise, there will be a Board of Supervisors special hearing in El Dorado Hills, and again, an evening meeting for the public to be able to voice their concerns when we get to that part of the process at the board's review. So this is an extraordinary situation, given the impact it can have on the community. So the board took the action to make those things happen. This is not a normal process. So let me emphasize that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just, again, first what John Davis and what Supervisor Heidel just said, this is an extraordinary action, not usual. It involves extra staff time. They have to work in the evening. It's bringing democracy to the people, because a lot of times the people in this community cannot get up to Planning Commission or Board of Supervisor hearings at 8:30 or 1 or whatever time in the middle of the week. If we do not have a large group of people showing up at the district church at 6 o'clock, the planning staff, the commission, the Board of Supervisors say, oh, they post stuff on social media, but they can't bother to go out, even though we made this extraordinary circumstance available. So if people do not show up, if you don't invite your friends, family, neighbors to show up, put fannies in the seats, then they can just say, you know what, we made this extraordinary effort, it didn't work, we're never going to have to do it again. So please, show up, because if you don't, then the developers are validated saying the people don't care. That's the impression that people are going to get.
All right.
I think we need to move on again, so thank you. So Cindy, you want to just update us on the short list of happenings?
I know, my list is back there. There was so much going on for the holidays that I guess for January there was hardly anything. The only big thing, well, next Monday, the Special Planning Commission meeting, and the Rotary is having their annual crab and pike tip feed, and I believe that's the 18th.
Correct.
And there's not a whole lot going on in January. Just slow it down a little bit.
That's a good thing. We need to slow down once in a while. Okay, so we're going to move on to good governance, and I did want to come do the lead-in for Richard on this. Transparency is something I'm a strong advocate for. How do we put the right information out available to the public so they have a chance to review information that's factual, as opposed to a lot of things that are thrown out on social media that have no basis in fact. It's opinion. So one of the things I've found is successful is writing fact sheets. You put together the information. The best example I have is the one the county did on Costco, where we had a series of stakeholder meetings. We collected all those questions that were asked. We synthesized it and we put it into a frequently asked questions type of format as a fact sheet. Is when is Costco coming? How long would it take to be built? How many people would they employ? All of those things were put into a county fact sheet. We put into our Nextdoor account, the Facebook account, the county's account, to try to provide factual-based information for people to review and understand from the county's perspective, this is what we're doing and why, okay? So my request of Richard is to look at, should we be doing more of those? For instance, when we have these major projects like Central, should we be preparing a fact sheet that defines the specific things that are the strongest elements and make those available to people? We've tried to provide references through Nextdoor and through Facebook in terms of here's where the information is. You can go look at the link to listen to the audio tape, whatever. But I think we do need to do more than that to set the record straight of what we're required to do by state law, what the provisions are for our policies and processes, what we have to fulfill as our obligation as elected officials before something can get passed. So if the general agreement is yes, those would be helpful, I can take that back to staff. This is going to take staff time to develop these things and to put them together so that when something comes out in some format that's totally off base from reality, we can quickly take one of these fact sheets, amend it as necessary, and provide that to the public to set the record straight as to what's really going on. and what's really required, as opposed to people's ideas in terms of opinions and those kinds of things, because I see more and more social media affecting people's thinking. But I would care to venture a lot of these things are just bad information, they're misinterpretations, whatever. Not all of them. Some of them are right on. But we need to make sure from the county's perspective, you hear our voice and understanding the obligation we have to do it right. So that's what we're hoping to do with that. So, Steve, you have a comment?
Yeah, one of the facts that comes up with any one of these projects is a number that comes out of the Auditor Controller's office that says this is a viable financial project for the county, or it's going to cost the county money and you can't afford it. That kind of document should be part of your transparency thing.
Totally agree, and we tried to work with the Auditor Controller to give us that kind of information. Sometimes that's difficult to get that agreement. So we're continuing to work that, but I agree with you. That ought to be some financial analysis of any of these things should be available to the public to understand what is the benefit to the community, what is the benefit to the county, is it overriding, giving the concessions that have to be made? That's where people should be basing their opinion on. Is this a positive overall, or is it a negative overall? And that's what I want to hear, because if the vast majority of the people I represent think it's a negative overall, I'm not going to support it unless there's modifications to it. But that's what this process is all about. It really amounts to a negotiation. It's not a hard fact that you say they have a development agreement, everything there is cast in concrete, we either act on that or not. That's not the case. And the Planning Commission's role is not to develop changes to the development agreement, but they can be recommending to the Board of Supervisors consideration of modifications or amendments or whatever you want to call it. And that's what I would look for, is those kinds of suggestions to come back to the board. Because now we have their best thoughts on it as to how we can mitigate, accommodate, condition, whatever it is, to get the best possible project before a vote's taken. Because that's what it's all about. How do you get the best possible project before it comes to the Board of Supervisors with all the inputs from the public? So that's what we're trying to strive for. So with that was a lead in. I just wanted to let Dick go ahead and comment on anything in addition to that. But I think that format works for me. I don't know if it works for everybody.
I'll be brief because John covered it. But also, I will first say this. Good governance starts with you. If you don't pay attention, then they're not going to think of all the things that need to be done. If we don't raise the questions, if we don't listen, if we don't participate, then we're getting exactly what we deserve. And this is a crowd at this meeting, very frankly. And out of what, 45,000 residents in the El Dorado Hills area, thank you. Thank you. You're a very select group, but thank you. But you've got to get your friends, your contacts, your neighbors. You should look at your email contacts lists. You should send out information about this meeting and how important it is to everybody, and to be there. Show up. That's really important. As to the fact sheets, I think they're great ideas to have. It's a great idea to have a point where you can go and look for a specific topic and find information that, at least from what you read, looks like it was researched and is documented, so you can feel comfortable with what you read. However, having gone to the EDC website and trying to find things that if you are not in the business, I'll tell you, the frustration curve goes up real quick, and pretty soon it's time to get another cup of coffee and check Facebook. It's ridiculous. So I think if we can maybe look at, and I think good research has gone into how to have a web page, but you have so many tabs across the front, the top, and I really do think it should be some kind of pyramid order that makes it a little bit easier. And even your page, John, you've got 3 columns, and some of them go 12 and 14 items. So
it's a complex system, though.
It's
the
tough.
thing that's important to me is a good search engine, and we don't have that in things like Legistar. I think the search engine we have on the web pages is a little better, but it's not as good as it can be. So that's what I think we have to ultimately get to. If I go to the APAC's website and I use the search engine, I can usually get to the information quicker, but oftentimes it ends up being a broken link.
Yes.
Because the county changed their URL for where that site is, and you go click on it and it says, oh, sorry, there's nothing there, because we don't coordinate how those things are done. So
that is a challenge. That is a challenge. And the last thing I would say, I would also maybe suggest that the pending agenda of the upcoming supervisors conference, that's the board of supervisors,
Right.
be listed, rather than going through meetings and going across and clicking on agenda and do that. So that when you go to the page, it says supervisors meeting, January 7th, boom, and there's the agenda. One good.
I think that's a good suggestion, because front page design, websites is a very difficult thing to
everybody
determine.
wants something.
Everybody wants something
Yeah,
different on it,
exactly
right?
right.
So,
But what you guys do is the most important thing.
yes.
Right. So you should
Staff wouldn't necessarily believe that. Okay. Yes.
Listening to what you just said, what are y'all going to do for me?
We're gonna have a meeting, we're gonna bring staff together, we're gonna talk to what can possibly be done, and to try to better understand the history of what led to this. And if there's something I can do to initiate a review, declare a variance, whatever it may be, that's what I want to explore. Is what can we do to help your situation? I don't know that we can do anything, but I'm gonna try to find it, whatever it may be.
Okay, that's you as a supervisor of the group.
The only, in your situation, I'm not sure anything other than infrastructure would fit into this. Okay, we can certainly invite John to participate, because he deals with the infrastructure. He's also on the planning commission. He's probably the closest to your particular situation. He worked for our El Dorado County Department of Transportation for 29 years.
Don't hold that against me.
So, but he understands how the organization operates and the history of what some of the stuff he's done. So he can certainly be invited, and I guess that's the invitation. And we'll make sure he's invited as well as our staff members, because that's probably the best representation across the leadership group.
Sure would like,
I'm willing to count. The difficulty for you is that I'm largely ineffective. I have no power to do anything except be your friend. But yeah, I know and I know you've worked with John Thompson at Black in the past. Let's talk to John and see if he has any memory or anything supporting. I've asked him, and he doesn't have anything physically in hand. But let's chat with him again. Oh, good. And you do. Okay. Well, if you have a copy, your daughter has my email. If they can send it to me, I'll send it to John.
So I don't mind including somebody as a representative from Black, because I think that's more than this leadership council. They're the local community group. So we can certainly invite somebody from Black, whether it's John or John Bailey or whatever.
Gainful employment might prevent me from a specific time, but let's see what works.
Okay, so that's our commitment to you. We'll set up the meeting, we'll invite the people to talk about it. Okay, so moving on, I think we're through, right, with the good governance, Richard? Okay, so let's move on to the APAC.
Oh, there we go. So next Wednesday, or this Wednesday, sorry. APAC meetings here in this building, 7 o'clock. We have a rather short agenda. We do have a presentation from Ann Novotny. She's planning manager, long range planning at the county. And with her, Aaron Mann, who's one of the senior planners, and Marty Eckert from De Novo Planning Group. They were here last month for the community council meeting. And they're going to be making a presentation on the county-initiated commercial multifamily residential design standard for community regions, including El Dorado Hills. So basically, it's an attempt to standardize sort of designs for multifamily and for commercial, and get resident input and just firm it up and have something that's a standard that this is where we start with projects like this. So it's an interesting presentation. We have a few APAC members that have applied to be on that. It's called Kathleen's committee advisory. It's a tough word. But they were here last month for community council, and they're going to be here again. They want to get out in front of this. They do have some funding to take care of this, and they're starting in Shingle Springs, or they started in Shingle Springs, and now they're fanning out, and they're hitting Cameron Park, El Dorado Hills, and I believe El Dorado Springs, if I'm remembering correctly. So they'll be here to make that presentation, and then our one project for the evening is the Central El Dorado Hills Specific Plan. If you can believe that. We have our subcommittee report that is completed. We've worked several months on that. And when we say there are 3,000 pages of documents, there are 3,000 pages of documents, and we have read them. The actual subcommittee report, I went ahead and I published it. It's on the APAC website tonight. We'll send out links for that tomorrow during the day. It's 37 pages of a subcommittee report, with 39 pages of supporting exhibits.
All by volunteers, by the way.
So, hey, that's what I was doing on New Year's Day. was wrapping that up. But it's lengthy, and there are things in there that our subcommittee has found compelling or have questions or concerns about that might be easily explained, but if we don't ask them, nobody knows the answers. There might be something on it that somebody hasn't fully considered, or maybe it's not fully addressed in like the draft development agreement or other items like that. So we will have a discussion, review, try not to get too deep in the weeds. It is a lot of reading. And then at that point, after we've discussed it, hashed it out, our voting members APAC will make a vote to either accept the recommendation of the subcommittee report or maybe to modify it with some other conditions or come to a different condition, or conclusion. So we'll have that activity, and then at the end of the night, we also have our we didn't meet a quorum at our last meeting. We'll elect our 2020 officers, and it's the same standing officers from last year. So I encourage you to come out, and again, to beat a dead horse, because I will beat a dead horse. The Planning Commission hearing, it is so unique that we have this opportunity to do this, and people will talk about how this project's great, this project's horrible, and be mad about it in later years because the way it turned out. This is your opportunity to participate. Ask your questions, provide comments, provide your concerns, and the planning commissioners will hear it, and then it's up to them to consider those things as they make their evaluation for what they're going to propose to the board of supervisors. So be here 7 o'clock. Give you tomorrow off, and then we'll see you here. I'm also here on Thursday for a CSD meeting, so I'm here all week, twice on Sundays.
Thank you for all your volunteers. Okay, moving right along, I'm going to defer the economic development. Glenn had to leave and stuff, and he'll be coming back next month, hopefully in a little stronger condition, and so he can give us an update on the CDAC meetings. But I'd like to jump to healthy communities. Dr. Josh Elder is usually the presenter on that. He couldn't make it this evening. And since we'd identified the fact that what are we doing, efforts to address the local homeless issues, which gets into affordable housing and stuff, I've asked Frank Porter, who's been very involved with that and works very close with Dr. Josh Elder, to come up. And why don't you either address the microphone here, up here, Frank, so we can all hear you. Just give us a summary of the activities that are going on in 3 to 5 minutes. Is that fair?
So my suggestion is respectfully to table this one until the next meeting. If we could the witching hour, we have 9 o'clock.
How many people are willing to stay another 5 minutes? I think it's better if we start if we're ready. 5 minutes. 5 minutes and we're done, okay? So you can give us the preliminary.
I wouldn't take offense if you all said come back next week.
I think there's some important dates and things coming up though, because we have a trip that we're going to go to Yuba City, right? So those of us who can't.
Okay, well thank you, and I will promise to be brief. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Richard mentioned the fact that this is a great turnout. I have not been to one of these meetings in quite a while. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And I also want to thank our John Heidel and John Vega and Bree for all the work that they're doing. As you can tell from this presentation tonight, this work isn't easy. It gets complicated, and there's a lot of maneuvering that one has to do to get things moving forward. And the homeless issue and the affordable housing issue are really, in my mind, and as I've studied this the last year, inextricably linked. We have a fundamental problem in our county. We have about a 3,000 shortage of affordable housing units. We have a problem statewide with young families not being able to afford housing. I don't know if you know that. I would recommend, I do spend time on the internet and going through the county website. And there are quite a few, some really interesting two things I would recommend to you. One of them is a recording of a forum that was done a year ago, a housing forum that was held here in Dorado Hills, I believe. I was not able to attend it because I was out of town on some business. But I did, in fact, people listen to the recordings, at least I do, the things that get recorded. And they had a wonderful presentation on the impacts of housing and the complications for our business community and economic development in our county because of the lack of affordable housing. I don't know if you know that our 3 major industries, agriculture or ag tourism, agriculture and manufacturing, business, and those are our constellation of issues. They all have trouble holding employees here, getting them to move here and live here. This is right, we have such a traffic problem down on the freeway, right on Latrobe Road, when the business park closes out, we've all been down there, and it's congested with traffic because why? The workers there can't afford to live here, so they commute down the hill to Cameron Park or to Rancho Cordova or West Sacramento, places where they can't afford housing. So we are creating pollution, we are creating traffic congestion, we are actually throttling back expansion of business in our business park. We are also frustrating our ag businesses. I have friends in the winery industry who struggle to get housing for their workers, adequate housing. So we do have a fundamental problem with a lack of affordable housing. And unfortunately also in this state, as Bree pointed out to you, there are multiple places where people can frustrate getting projects to the build point, the go button. And some of them, you know, that's a good thing in some ways. In many ways, it actually has exacerbated our problem. Because in some ways, us, and by the way, it's not us that I've lived here 37 years, we create the problem of affordable housing. Why? Because we demand multiple, we speak out of both sides of our mouths, honestly. We say, yes, we have an affordable housing project, but no, we don't want you to build it over here, or here, or here, or not in my backyard, build it somewhere else. And the fundamental problem is we have to start understanding there has to be a balance. We have to have a range of housing, a continuum of housing. We also have to be providing some housing for people who've fallen off if you will, fallen out of housing. In many cases, not because of things that they had control over. The point in time count of our homeless population in our county was just completed and reported on this last fall. We have 600. The point of count study is the one that the federal government uses around the country. It's done on a certain date in January every other year. And that sets up a point at which we measure how our homeless population is. The most recent one for January 19 was 613 homeless people in our county. It's done in the middle of winter. Why? Because that's the point when they can find more people. It's also actually the lowest point of homelessness. Why? Because it's the winter time and people are, if they can find housing, they find it in the winter for all the obvious reasons. So it's a way to actually get it. It's a number that they can benchmark growth and change in the homeless population. In El Dorado County, easily half of those people are lifelong residents of our county. 50% of the homeless people in our county are basically long-term, lifelong residents of El Dorado County. They've fallen out of housing because of all the reasons you can imagine. It costs. And this is another study I'd rather recommend. I'll send Cindy. I know that John has published it once, but it gets lost in all the other stuff. But the California Housing Partnership published a study back in August of 19, last August. It costs the average family, you need a $34.13 an hour income in order for the average family, 3 people, to afford the average apartment in El Dorado County. The median price for an apartment now is $1,775. So you need an income of $34. Well, think of all the people who are working minimum wage jobs for jobs at $10, $12, $15 an hour, trying to support a family. The math doesn't work. If you have young children who've gotten out of college, and you have, as I have, who struggle to get into housing themselves, you know, they come to dad. I'm subsidizing housing, by the way, in the 20s. My kids. I don't know about you. Why? Because it's so darn expensive. And when you're just starting out, we are actually shooting ourselves in the foot by not addressing this problem. So we need to own some of the problem by helping our elected leaders come forward with proposals to have a broad range of housing in our county. Why? Because we are exacerbating the problem and we're actually hurting our economy down at the same time. So I will give, here's the good news. There is great news too. We have, and I'll leave this with you. I'm part of a coalition that formed to look at, there are lots of good stuff going on in our county to address homelessness. The county has got more money coming in. They hired a great new housing and human services director. He's been busy doing his job. The planning staff has been doing their job with their housing element. So, and there are a lot of nonprofits who are doing wonderful work. And this is a guide to all of their work. And so part of our coalition's goal is to three things: to assist in fundraising for local projects, to help them do what they're doing, to encourage community members to provide volunteer services, and provide community education like tonight on what the problem is and how we need to own the stuff, helping our leaders solve the problem. Because we need to move forward. And this, as John pointed out earlier, if my last point, I'll get the hook here. The state is putting more and more expectations and pressure on local governments to come up with solutions. Why? Because they have an enormous problem. Well, the benefit of that is there's a lot of state money, enormous amounts of state money, and low-income tax credits, federal grants, and so on. But if we fail to lead and take action on reasonable projects now, down the road, we're going to have fewer choices, to be honest with you. So now is the time for us to help our local leaders step up and lead, and not dally around trying to wait to let the state come in and then blame them. So with that, I will.
We do have one question, Margie, just very quickly.
Sometime around the 70s, we had this vote
What's that?
around the 70s, we had this problem with the working monitor, and we had some low-cost housing down below our market.
Yeah, we do it. We do have affordable housing projects.
I worked with a lot of affordable people, and it wasn't so much that they now had a place to live, but they couldn't afford to buy groceries.
Right. So that's an ongoing issue. We have mobile home park situations, we have seniors, so it's a big subject. I didn't want to belabor it, but I do want you to know that the county is working on these things. One thing I'll mention is we're planning a road trip. And by that I mean county representatives, the city of Placerville representatives, board of supervisors, nonprofits. We're going to go to a facility that's up in Marysville called 14 Forward, where they've been able to build a series of, basically they're tough sheds for people to have temporary housing in, but they bring services right to that location. They do training on people, help them get job skills. That's the thing we're going to go visit and see where we could possibly put that into an El Dorado County type of implementation. And whether that's the city of Placerville or Diamond Springs or El Dorado Hills, you have to look at where the homeless population is to try to address that. But we are doing something is what I'm trying to say.
Is that you have to worry about how they can live once you're there.
Right. So it's not, it's a hand up, it's not a handout type of thing. You have to make sure that people get skills. If they have the ability to acquire skills, to be productive members of society again. So I'm going to stop there. I do want to make one final note, and that is our next meeting is Monday, February the 3rd, and our guest speaker will be Assemblyman Kevin Kiley. Kevin's agreed to come and speak with us about what he sees happening for legislative action at the California State Legislature, in particular the types of things that he wants to propose as legislation. I've had several discussions with him about the situation with fire districts and not having adequate funding. And what do we do to bring more funding? And it's got to be a new revenue source. He at one time suggested it be maybe a cap and trade type of thing. I don't think that's been advanced, but we need to revisit that. What's the proper timing, and what do you do to try to address our local, regional, and somewhat remote fire departments to make sure they stay solvent and it doesn't just turn into a CAL FIRE response? Now that's not going to happen in El Dorado Hills in all likelihood, but Mosquito and Georgetown and Garden Valley and any number of other communities, that's a reality. And unfortunately, those people without the fire station there probably can't get fire insurance, even to a greater degree than they can't get fire insurance today. So it's a spiraling event if you don't get it addressed up front. So that's one of the things we've talked to Assemblyman Kiley on. I'm talking about the Mental Health Services Act and modifications that need to happen to that. CSAC has now taken a position on that, which I'm glad to say their thoughts align with mine. You need to change the legislative part of this to enable counties to provide services with more flexibility to those people who have mental health issues. Because we've been constrained to a large measure by the state, the way they pass these legislative actions. They're overly constraining. So hopefully we'll be able to open some of that stuff up, deliver better services for the same dollar, but it takes a continuing activity to work with the state legislators to empower the counties to do these things. That's the way it has to come out. So as that's a lead, I invite you back next month, and Assemblyman Kiley will be here barring any emergencies, and you can certainly ask him your questions about the things you'd like to see happen at the state capitol. So that's a big picture, right? So thank you again for your attendance. Really appreciate your patience with us, and hope you come back.
Hang on one second. I want to make sure that